Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds, and I'm here with Keith, co-star of my upcoming film, If, only in theaters May 17th. Do you want to tell people the big news? All right, I'll do it. Sign up now and you'll get unlimited for $15 a month and 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan on us. MintMobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 equivalent to $15 per month. Unlimited over 40 gigabytes per month. Face lower speeds. Videos at 480p. Active Mint customers by 531.24 get 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan. Auto renews after 6 months. Offer ends May 31st, 2024. Separate Paramount Plus registration required. Terms and conditions apply if rated PG.
Hello and welcome back to First Act, a podcast from Kochie's Business Builders. I'm Seth Busby.
I'm Adam Bubb.
And on this podcast, Adam and I find out the first acts of Australia's most innovative people in business and life.
These are the backstories you didn't know, the secret jobs, the failed ideas, the aha moments, the learnings and the laughs along the way. There's no such thing as an overnight success, we've learned. And there's a million different pathways to get there. Today's guest has probably done a few burpees on his journey.
Cameron Falloon is passionate about fitness. He's spent decades helping elite athletes, the rich and famous, and everyday Aussies meet their fitness goals to be the best that they can be. He's the founder of Body Fit Training, the fastest growing fitness franchise in Australia, with over 240 locations across the globe. Plus, he's the former head fitness coach of the Geelong Cats, the Western Bulldogs, and for a time was the high performance coach of Port Adelaide Power. Not to mention that at the ripe old age of 24, he was the personal trainer of perhaps the world's most famous woman, Princess Diana. Now, he joins us today to share some of the fascinating journey that he's had along this road to becoming a fitness guru. Welcome, Cam.
Good morning or good afternoon, guys. Thanks for having me on.
It is such a pleasure to have you on today's podcast, Cam. Now, we always start First Act with what we call our First Act icebreaker. So just a bit of a left field question. And your icebreaker question for today is, what is one everyday food you can't live without and one you'd rather live without?
Well, I'll start with I'd rather live without cabbage.
I don't mind some cabbage.
Not a massive fan of me, certainly repeats on me, so that's not good for a lot of people. But the live without, my morning coffee, I don't think I could live without.
Oh, I'm with you right there. I mean, just morning coffee. How many coffees do you have a day?
3 double shots a day.
I like the sound of this. This is, Cam, you're my kind of guy. Right? This is good.
It used to be 5, but I've toned it down.
Oh, wow.
Oh, well, I'm sure there's a few highly caffeinated people listening right now who probably are quite similar, but, each to their own. So, Cam, look, let's talk about fitness, because you get your energy not just from coffee, you get your energy from fitness. So did that play a big role in your life growing up? Did you come from a sporty family? What is your earliest sporting memory?
Yeah, my earliest sporting memory is playing junior footy as a really young kid, probably 6 or 7 years of age, and hanging around the local footy club. I've had an older brother and sister, so it was sort of football and netball, and I've come from a fairly sporty family, surfing, swimming, netball, squash, you name it, we gave it a go. So sport has always been an important part of my life. Never reached the professional heights. I was always just a bit of a weekend warrior and battler, but loved it nonetheless. And it's always been a constant, very important part of my life for both physical and mental health.
So you said weekend warrior, but did you ever kind of consider sport as a career? Was there ever the desire to get out on the field rather than behind the scenes and make that your career?
Yeah, it was for a short period of time. I was an okay footballer. I was in state squads as a junior with football. But when I was 18, I had a pretty serious back injury and was told that probably best for my longevity to give those dreams away. So don't know whether I would have been good enough to have played at the highest level anyway, but it was certainly taken away from me when I was 18 years of age, and that I guess that really sharpened my focus in terms of where I wanted to direct my time and attention, which was what led me to studying in the field that I now work in.
That must have been shattering. as a teenager, you've got these dreams and then you have an injury and you go, like really, it's something that really teaches you a lot of resilience from a young age, doesn't it? Like having to deal with something like that.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think at that age, I don't know whether really your mind goes to resilience and having a real clear strategy about how you want to attack it. For me, it was I've just had a dream of, giving something a go, and that was playing AFL footy, and that's been taken away. But it was bigger than that for me. I was told that I'd never be physically active again, and I'll never forget the words of a rheumatologist. It was basically, you'll never be active again and you need to go and find yourself a desk job. And at that point in my life, that was really an unrealistic view into my future. I couldn't imagine that. I couldn't imagine not being active, let alone sitting behind a desk. And ironically, I spend most of my time behind a desk now running this business. But it was a real shock to the system, and I had some pretty dark moments. But what that led to was, okay, the only way I can get out of this is to learn more about my body and to learn how to look after myself. As most 18-year-olds, you're just young and you're healthy, and you don't really have or pay too much time and attention into the things that can go wrong or how to do things better with your body and your mind. And I thought, gee, I don't really know much about my body. I'm just a young bloke who loves to exercise, and at that point in time could eat whatever I wanted to. So it really sharpened my focus on looking at what I didn't know and how could I improve those areas and learn more to help myself, because, there wasn't a lot of people around at that point in time that are going to be able to pull you out of that hole or change your life. You have to take responsibility for it yourself and do something about it, and that's what led me to study. So that studying sports science and human movement was really about me, to be honest. It was about me trying to learn about my body and be active and understand how to move and look after myself, more so than it was having a direct objective to have a career in this field.
You spoke a bit about the mental health benefits of personal training, and like one of your most famous personal training clients was Princess Diana. So was that the focus that she had when she came to you for training, like using fitness as a tool for well-being rather than just for fitness? And also, how does an Aussie backpacker, because that's kind of what you were at the time, who's bumming around, end up working with the princess?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. So, yeah, I was fortunate, a little bit of right time, right place. I started working in pubs in the West End of London, and then that led to doing some training and personal training. I worked at the Earls Court Gym, and I did a few gym shifts per week in the busy hours. That paid for my rent. Several months in, the owner, I had a few sort of high-profile business people that I was training, and he was getting some positive feedback, and he pulled me into his office one day and said, look, you probably are not aware, but Princess Diana trains here outside of business operating hours with her trainer, and we would like for you to bring in one or two of your clients and for you to train them at the same time, so that she just wasn't in the gym by herself with her trainer. So I did that for about 10 or 12 months, and obviously we get to know each other pretty well because there's only 4 of you in the gym 2 to 3 times a week for an hour. And then she parted ways with her trainer and asked Ian, the owner of the gym, to put a list of names together of the best trainers in London for her to start to vet. My name was on that list, and because we had a relationship, she said, well, let's just start there. So it was more fortuitous than it was around my skill sets or my expertise as a personal trainer, to be really honest with you. So that was a little bit fortuitous for me. And then, yeah, I think, to answer the question about the training, it was definitely as much physical as it was mental. She was the most famous person in the world, and it's probably hard for people to imagine that now, but this is the time before, Google wasn't invented when I was training Princess Di, so it's a long time ago. And certainly there wasn't mobile phones with cameras, and she was the most photographed person in the world. So for her to have a few hours a week of pure privacy, be in an area where she trusted people, where people weren't going to go and sell the story and try and get photos of her and all those sorts of things, I think was as much about the training as it was about that mental break and that mental respite that she was getting from her day-to-day life.
Because you also get like a bit of an insight into somebody's state of mind, like when you're training them, you know, like how they feel when they arrive, and then how they feel when they leave as well. What do you remember? What kind of stands out to you from there? Were there humorous moments? Were there like when you were doing those sorts of sessions with Princess Di?
Oh, I think it's similar to all clients. You develop a really personal relationship, hence the name personal training. Not all clients come for the physical side of things, and I learned that really on, that some people are there just because if you weren't standing there helping them, then they wouldn't turn up to the gym at all. They know it's good for them, but they don't want to be there. And so making it fun and accessible for them and inclusive enough that anyone from any walk of life feels like they can benefit from it, I think that's really important. And I think everyone walks away feeling like, you know, they're better when they leave the gym than they are when they walked in, just because they turned up, not necessarily because of the session. Certainly some sessions are better than others, and more people like the training element more than others. You can push them and try different things, but understanding your clients and their personalities and their needs, turning up is half the battle. And if you can make it fun and get them to enjoy it and keep them coming back, then hopefully the training side of it and the physical side of it will have its benefits over time, because it does take time. But, you know, if people can leave on a smile on their face and say thank you, generally that's a pretty good indicator that they've enjoyed the session, because most of the time you're inflicting some element of discomfort on your clients. So it's a bit of a love-hate relationship between personal trainers and their clientele.
Now, you mentioned walking out of the gym and feeling better than when you walked into it. So you were one of the first people to come up with the idea of a 12-week challenge. What was the inspiration for that?
To be honest, it was two real reasons. One was a bit selfish. I'd come back to Australia from working in London and went back to do more study and realised that the difficult part of personal training is you're trading your time for money. And so if you're taking on one client every hour, then you can there's a limit in terms of what you can achieve and how many people can access your training, but also how much money you can make. And so the concept of at the time, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I did a 12-week challenge. And I quickly learned that I could, I enrolled 12 people on the first one, and the second course I did, I enrolled 24 people. And what I was doing was 2 group training sessions a week plus one-on-one session with each of those people. And I learned really quickly, which is what we now do with Body Fit Training, is that people love being in a group and they love the camaraderie, the banter, the sense of achievement that they've done something with a group of people, whether they've got and battled their way through a tough physical training session and they've done it with someone else. So there's a bond that, can't be replaced now. And so I love that. I love the fact that rather than just trading your time one-on-one, you could impact 12 people in the same period of time or 24 people in the same period of time. So that was really appealing to me. And the more I did it, the more I realised that the people love that too. And then obviously there's the commercial element to it as well, which I said that it's far more beneficial to have 12 people paying you per hour than have one person paying you per hour. So it was certainly trial and error, but intuitively and spending time in sporting clubs and, both participating in sport but also working in sport, team sports are great places to be. You ride the highs and the lows and you get to know the intimate details of people's lives and form relationships that are everlasting. And I still catch up with people from the very first 12-week challenge that I did back in the late 90s, early 2000s and have coffee. It's been a lifelong bond, which I'm really grateful for.
How did you come back to Australia and how did you get involved in, you trained some of Australia's favourite AFL teams. How did you make that transition and get into that world? And what's been the difference do you find from training elite athletes to just training everyday Aussies?
I guess the transition for me was I came back to study. I realised whilst I had a basic certification and basic level of knowledge when I was working in the UK, that I really just intuitively felt like I needed to learn more and add more value to clientele. And through doing that and just with that increased knowledge, that naturally opens up more questions and you become a little bit more curious about other areas of the industry. So that initially led me to doing a lot of rehabilitation work, working with orthopedics and physios, primarily with spinal and back rehabilitation, which was the injury that I sustained when I was younger. So it was an area of interest. And then I got into a little bit of corporate training, and I was really just testing the waters to see what's out there. And, it's a big wide world in terms of how I could apply my skills and knowledge in the industry, not just in PT. So I did some corporate training. It wasn't really my thing, to be honest, and didn't enjoy it as much. But I met a gentleman there who was an ex-Socceroo, and we just happened to have a chat one day, and he just off the cuff asked me a question around if I could do anything in the world in the fitness landscape, what would it be? And it really, really made me think. And at the time, Manchester United were probably one of, if not the biggest sporting clubs in the world. And so simplistically, I thought, well, if that's the pinnacle, if they're the biggest in the world, surely that's got to be my goal. I've got to have a goal to work at the biggest sporting club in the world. And that's what really, I guess, drove my interest to then get involved in sport. So I got involved in some soccer academies with Derby County, who at the time were in the Premier League. Got involved with soccer in Australia, and then that led to working in the AFL. It wasn't really something that I had initially thought of. It was more, it evolved over time as I had different experiences within the industries and wanted to challenge myself in different areas. But I'm very grateful that all of those things happened and led me to working with athletes. It's a great environment. I love the pressure. I love the fact that every week's a win and a loss, and you're constantly striving to improve both yourself as a coach in terms of how you communicate and execute your plans and how you interact and motivate the individuals. All the sports I've been involved with are team sports, so it's a really collaborative approach, and it's, in my view, much nicer to share the highs and lows with other people, much like I talked about those 12-week challenges where you're all riding the bumps and the ebbs and flows together, and those memories can never be lost and are bonds that are really hard to break. So that was a really exciting journey, and really I think the difference with AFL and elite athletes to the weekend warrior, it's not too different. In fact, I think the weekend warriors tend to appreciate your work and the hard effort, the time and energy you put into it more so than the athlete, only because the athlete knows that you're there to service them, that you're being paid to do that job, that's your role, you're there to improve them. Whereas when you go over and beyond with a PT client or someone in a group training environment, there's no expectation that you'll do that. So it feels like, and the feedback I've had is that it's far more appreciated. So at the end of the day, the elite athlete is a person. Your personal training client is a person, or your group training member is a person, and they have families, they have personal stories, they have histories, and a big part of your job in the fitness industry, whether you're a strength and conditioning coach or a PT, is the psychology of what you do, and it's understanding who the individual is, understanding their triggers, having some empathy and understanding their story and their life, and taking an interest in that, and that makes you believable and authentic.
So after you spent around 15 or so years immersed in that AFL world, you decided to call it quits because you wanted to spend some more time with your young family. But it wasn't very long before you got itchy feet. So tell us about that aha moment that first sparked the idea for body fit training, and how is BFT different from other gyms or training programs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I decided to take some time out, and I actually started a 24-hour gym because I couldn't sit still, and that probably was more the aha moment once I had that up and running, where 24-hour gyms can be really good businesses. You still have to work them and work in them, but I wasn't getting stimulated in terms of, I guess, utilising my skills and knowledge that I'd learnt and acquired over many years of study and working in team sport. I guess the choice for me was go back into sport, which I had a really strong pull to go back in, but I didn't want to do that because of family, and just I wanted to spend more time with the kids. So I researched the commercial fitness space, and there just seemed to be a really obvious gap in the industry. a lot of people who would listen to the podcast may know CrossFit, which was doing, a lot of really good work getting people exposed to extreme sort of barbell and kettlebell training in particular. But it's a very sort of certain personality type that goes to CrossFit. And then at the other end of the spectrum was some brands out of the US, Orange Theory and Barry's Boot Camp, and there was an emerging Australian brand, F45. But they were all really aerobic, sort of entry-level type training programs where there was no real strength training element to it. And so there was this huge void in the market between those brands, and I really felt like that's where my skill set lied, in doing sort of more strength and conditioning based programs and having a bit more of a considered approach to how programs were done. When you plan for an athlete and a team, it's done in training cycles and using what's called periodization. The programming is progressive. The athletes are learning skills all the time, both specific to the sport and also in the gym, and they're developing and refining those skills over time. And I couldn't quite understand why that wasn't happening in the commercial fitness space. We have all these gyms in Australia and we still have a massive problem with obesity in Australia. We have a massive problem with mental health in Australia. So it feels like we're failing. And so how can I be a part of that solution, and why isn't it that in mainstream commercial fitness spaces there isn't programming and exercise prescription that is akin to what would be allowed or provided to an elite athlete? And so that was the opportunity that I saw. And so BFT we're a strength-based group training model. All of our programs are progressed over an 8-week training block, and what that means is they progressively advance, whether that's in movement complexity and or exercise intensity. And over the 8 weeks, it ebbs and flows. And I guess to put it simply, if you're an AFL footballer, you do a pre-season, and pre-seasons are tough, and training and playing as an AFL footballer is extremely physically demanding, but you couldn't do it every day because you'd break down. And so you have high intensity days, you have moderate intensity days, you have low intensity days, you do strength training, you do aerobic conditioning, you do things like Pilates and yoga and mobility. And essentially that's what BFT is modelled off. It's taking those ideas and methodologies that are afforded to elite athletes and making them accessible to the everyday weekend warrior.
Well, Cam, I can tell just from hearing how you speak about it, you're so deeply passionate about it. But we are going to have to take a very quick break, and we'll hear a little bit more about BFT after this short break.
So we're back with Cameron Falloon, and what I'd like to know about BFT, it's actually a franchise model. Was that always the case?
No, it wasn't. I set up 4 test studios in 2016, so late 2015 started working on the model. June 2016 we opened up the first site in Paran, and quickly learned a few lessons and made a lot of mistakes. Opened up the second location in November in South Yarra, and at that point in time I realised that the product itself the members were enjoying. There was just other elements of the business model that I needed to refine and get right. And I was very fortunate that we had a family friend who was involved with getting a chain of sports stores in Australia, which some may remember, a chain called Sportsgo, off the ground. And so I was able to ring him and just get some advice on franchising. I really didn't have a history or knowledge or understand it. And so the choice for me was continue to open my own studios and own them, or maybe get some managers in and give them a little bit of equity, etc. So they had some ownership and felt like they had some skin in the game, or similar to the thinking of when I did the 12-week challenges many years ago about getting more people exposed to the model. Franchising seemed like that was a great way to go. I could develop the IP and develop the systems and processes, and as long as I could develop them and be able to scale them, then more people could benefit from this, and the brand and the business model could grow quicker. And so after the initial 4 test sites in Melbourne and as I said, making a lot of mistakes and learning from those mistakes and refining it, it became pretty clear to me that franchising was going to be the option. And in early 2017, was when I first started talking to franchise lawyers and just getting a really clear understanding of what the requirements were and what it was going to take, and how long that would take to get it to a point where I was ready to actually be comfortable to start selling franchises and then in turn support franchisees to be successful.
You mentioned mistakes, and I think this is one of those things that we hear. We hear a lot on this podcast from entrepreneurs who've learned kind of lessons the hard way. And I'm sure that you've had a few as well that you've learned. Has there any from that period that stick out to you that you think, I don't want anybody else to repeat this mistake?
I think that it's a really interesting thing. You always learn from your mistakes, and to be honest, no one likes making them, is the honest truth. But it's going to happen, and it's going to happen especially in startup businesses. The first location I opened, the first mistake was we got the space wrong. So the space was too small, which meant we couldn't get enough bums on seats, which meant the financial model broke down. So that's a pretty monumental mistake from day one. So the second site then, I quickly learned that needed to be bigger. And there's sort of two elements to it. The second site was bigger, but again, I learned that wasn't big enough as well. And one thing I did know was I needed to just get started. So there was an element of, I know I'm going to make mistakes. I just need to get started to make the mistakes and learn from them. So if I had waited for the perfect piece of real estate to come along, I may not have got started. So part of it is going in with a little bit of your eyes wide open, knowing that there's going to be some issues. Site number 3 and 4, we got the perfect spaces and had nailed the model. Probably not nailed it, was probably 90% there. And that's what gave me real confidence to go, okay, I've got the space right, I've got the dimensions right, we've got all the multiples of equipment right, we've got the equipment pack right, we've got rid of some equipment and we've added it in from the things that we've learned in the member feedback. We've changed some of our programming because what I want and what I thought might be really enticing for the general population, we got some feedback that it wasn't, so we had to change a few of the programs. And so I don't know whether there's one thing. There's just so many things that you get wrong.
No, thank you for your honesty about those. Gyms were so hard hit during the pandemic, but one of the things that you're really proud of that we've heard about is that BFT didn't lose a single business. Why do you think all of your franchises have been able to stay afloat when so many haven't been able to?
Yeah, we have our number one kind of value that we hang our hat on at BFT is fairness. And so I think that really shone through COVID. The key pillars of our business are our members, our franchisees, and then us as the franchisor. And each of those three stakeholders has to win. So the members have to be getting great value and service for the membership fee that they're paying and results. The franchisees need to be getting great support and IP from us to be able to run their businesses and be successful and make money. And if those two things are working, then us as the franchisor get looked after and we then get our royalties and we're happy. So I think that values-driven kind of approach is what really held us in good stead in COVID. We really didn't know what this COVID thing was going to be all about. We were somewhat fortunate to have COVID hit Singapore and America before it hit Australia, and we had franchises over there. So we were able to quickly learn about what the potential landscape was going to look like in Australia. And so we quickly turned some of our software into an online platform, and we decided that we'd drive 100% of the revenue from the online platform to our franchisees. So we worked really hard with a lot of our commercial partners, that provided things like our booking systems or our heart rate monitors and things like that to reduce as much as we possibly could in terms of ongoing fees to our franchisees during that period to allow them to keep operating but to not have any, extensive and onerous overheads. We cut 100% of all fees that were being paid to head office, and we directed 100% of the revenue to our franchisees. And it was a big risk, but we were very fortunate that leading into COVID, probably the 4 months leading in as a brand, we'd really started to have a presence in the marketplace. We had a really good run rate in terms of sales, and that gave us a little bit of a buffer financially as well. So from a head office perspective, we were able to go for a period of time without income. Whilst not ideal, we were able to do that, and to be honest, we thought COVID would last 6 months, and in Victoria it lasted 2 years, so we kind of got that wrong. But
oh, didn't we all though? Didn't we all?
Yeah, we all did. And I think the other key thing that we did was, and again, this was a big risk, was we learned really quickly that the COVID and lockdowns were having a different impact on different people, and a lot of that was situational and personality based. So we didn't have the capacity at the time to be on the phone and answer every single call as much as we wanted to, and often it was just to listen. So we made the decision to hire more staff and to provide more support to our franchisees, and a lot of that wasn't really business support, it was just being on a phone call and just reassuring them that we're here and we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure they stay viable and they don't lose their investment. And that, again, was a risk. We actually quadrupled our staff over the 2 years of COVID, and the goodwill that created in our business coming out of COVID was amazing. And to have not lost a franchisee, it's a great story to sell, but importantly, it's authentic. And when people are looking at BFT and coming out of COVID, or they're looking for an investment, they're going to secret shop you, they're going to call franchisees, they're going to go into studios and ask questions about you. And we felt really confident that whether it was myself or business partner Rich or any of our staff, that they were going to speak really highly of us, because we really were genuinely concerned, but putting all of our energy and effort into making sure that they survive, because without them, we don't exist. So it was really easy for us to probably stand staff down as an example at head office. Well, we made the decision not to do that. I think we stood staff down here for 5 days, and then we went, no, we've got to put them all back on. We didn't cut anyone's pay. We just tried to do the right thing by everyone. So we felt that long term that would hold us in good stead and create a lot of goodwill. And the reality of it is, if the franchisees go down, we don't have a business. And if we went down, they don't have a business. So we did take a few calculated risks, and touch wood, we've come out the other side and it's paid off.
It certainly is a good news story, and not particularly typical of the franchise industry. The franchise industry gets a pretty bad rap oftentimes, but clearly BFT stands apart in the way that you treat your franchisees and the support that you give them. Now, that kind of wasn't the only challenge that you faced in the last couple of years. You also had a pretty massive court case that was brought on by your competitor, F45, but you've since won that. So, number one, what kind of pressures did that put on the business and you personally? And also, what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, look, it put a lot of pressure on the business. The first legal letters I received was in around about March of 2017. So at that stage, I had the two of the 4 test pilot sites up and running. So that's a pretty daunting letter to get really early stages of, your business development, when you're really just trying to prove a business model, let alone start fighting a fairly large company. And it really was stressful and continued for 5 or 6 years, having only just really wrapped up. I guess for me, the lesson that I learned and the lessons that we kept talking to our franchisees and head office staff is, let's just control what we can control. We can't control someone filing a lawsuit against us. Whether we think it's valid or not is irrelevant. We can't control what they're doing. What we control is how we act and how we behave as a brand and as individuals within the brand, what we say both publicly and also within the industry and also legally. And so it's really to ensure that we, first and foremost, that we get great legal advice and that we never felt at any point in time, and I never felt at any point in time, that the allegations had any real merit to them. But at the same time, you can't be so strong in your opinions and thoughts you become dismissive of them. You're in a legal case and it's serious, but control what you can control. Try and be better than the other person. There's a lot of, it's really easy to get engaged in this stuff and to get negative and start to get into a I guess a he said, she said type battle. We focus on BFT. I really respect all of our competitors, and I think competition is good. It'd be like having, if the AFL only had one team, no one would go and watch the AFL. The beauty of it is there's 18 teams and they're all different and they all compete to try and become the best. We love competition. We work, to be honest, a lot with some of our competitors and collaboratively, and if we do that, I think the industry's better. I think the general population and the members benefit from that as well. And so for us, it was focus on our business, focus on our franchisees, focus on our members, let the lawyers do the lawyering. That'll take care of itself to a large degree, and focus on trying to have good relationships and do good rather than try and put people out of business. And that was our approach. The courts, everyone's had their day in court, and we're very fortunate that we have been on the winning side of it. Having said that, winning hasn't really done anything for our business. So other than spend a lot of legal money and it has caused some stress, but it's a bit of a necessary evil having lawyers and legal contracts. It's important, but you hope that you never ever have to rely on them. So, yeah, my advice would be focus on yourself and focus on your business, and don't worry too much about your competitors and other people and what they're saying unless it's positive.
Mm. You've got a court case coming up in the US as well now too, don't you?
They've actually just pulled out. So we won that case similar to the Australian case.
Oh, fantastic.
So the patent got removed in America, and we were also deemed to be not infringing upon the patent. F45 did appeal that, but they've just recently, in the last 7 days, pulled out of that appeal.
Oh, that's great. Great for you. So in terms of taking the brand overseas, was that world domination always part of the BFT journey that you had in mind? And have you had to accommodate any sort of changes to how BFT runs, or the sort of training that you do to suit a different global audience?
Yeah, I always had 1,000 studios globally as the goal.
Small goal, tiny.
And I'm a big believer that if you only want to have 10, you'll probably get 3 or 4. But if you try and get 100, you'll get 50. So I thought 1,000 is just a nice number, and it's certainly, in terms of trying to get BFT and the programming, as well as sell enough franchises that give passionate people an opportunity to have a lifestyle and earn an income through a business that they're passionate about. 1,000 is a pretty cool number. And I'm really pleased to say that we're closing in on our 600th global sale, which will happen in the next couple of months. So we're still a fair way away, but we're getting close. But, yeah, certainly in new markets we do have to change some things. We're having some conversations with people in Spain at the moment, and, it's just a different market. And at the moment in particular, European markets are really being hit harder with inflation because of the war in the Ukraine. There's just far greater macroeconomic challenges, not to say that we're not challenged in Australia, but they're being hit a lot harder with things in some of the European cities. So, yeah, there's some slight changes to our model, slight changes to how we sell our memberships. We have what's called an unlimited passport membership, which means it's one membership fee. You can go to unlimited classes and you can access any studio in the world with that membership. But we're going to have to go to some class packs, and in Spain it's an industry where our price point hasn't been seen, so it would be very risky for us to invest over there and get people to invest in our brand and expect them to sell at the prices we're selling in Australia and America and other areas that we operate. So it's very important that we spend time in country and we learn the local landscape and the nuance of the landscape, both from a commercial perspective but also culturally. An interesting thing is in Spain, they just have far more classes in the evening than they do in the morning. It's a very social, community-type culture. They work long hours. They have it's called siesta, but no one really goes and sleeps anymore. They might just go to the gym or go and socialise or take an hour out of the day, but they'll work later into the night, and it's not uncommon for them to be training at 9 or 10 at night. So they're all things that you just need to learn in country. And be open to pivoting and changing your business model. It doesn't change the core values and the essence of what body fit training is, but it's making it accessible to the people within that region based on, whether it's commercial or financial or cultural differences and nuances. much like language, if we go into South Korea, everything needs to get converted. We can't expect to go in there and operate under an English franchise book and operations manuals. We need to convert them to the local language of that region. So it's a really exciting time. We're learning a lot as a business, challenging us to think differently and come up with new ways that we can still make our business grow and develop and be profitable for our franchisees whilst respecting the nuances of each of the regions that we're going into.
Cam, we don't have much more time with you, unfortunately, but I do want to ask, because one of the things that's sort of come out a lot throughout this interview is that constant learning process. I think anyone who runs any business, anyone who's listening to this will sort of get that sense that you have to be really quite open-minded to survive. What do you think is one sort of like real abiding kind of piece of advice or like ultimate kind of learning for you that you think is super important that you want to imprint on others?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know whether I have one. I mean, you've just got to be open to, you are going to make mistakes. It's how you then act quickly and make an informed decision to put into effect the right change and the right strategy. I hear a lot of people go, yeah, this is my opinion and I think that's really dangerous versus we're of the good fortune now we can do a survey of our 60,000 members and we'll get some really clear themes and some really direct feedback. And we need to be, as a business, open to listening and then learning from that and then using the skills of the people at head office here to strategise around how best we implement some of these things and changes to continue to evolve as a business. We have, I guess, the core essence of our business and what we stand for, but that doesn't mean that we can't change how we do things as long as we're true to our values. So you need diversity. I'm massive on having diversity of views in the room. So when we sit around the boardroom table or we sit with our senior leadership team, it's important that we have people that don't think like me, that people have a very different view and potentially a polarising view to what I do, because if I was surrounded by people who think like me, well, I may as well not have them because they're only going to do what I want to do. So I think having in your business as you grow, getting people who can think differently. I'm massive on employing people who are way better at their job than I am and empowering them and giving them the tools to really own their role, but to continue to evolve and develop that role to be best in class. So use the data in your business. Businesses have so many data points and touch points these days that if you're not using the data to help you to make objective decisions rather than emotional decisions, then you're probably failing your business.
That's so true. Data is so important to business these days. Any way they can capture it and use it, the better their business will be, the more successful. Cam, I'm really sorry. We're just going to have to stop you there. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. But thanks so much for joining us today. We really loved chatting with you on First Act. And you can find out more about Cam and Body Fit Training at bft.com.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Cam. It's been great chatting with you. And thank you, First Actors, for listening to today's episode. And we'll come back with you very soon with another First Act conversation. Bye.